Hi, I'm Claire Tompkins, the Clutter Coach, and this is the Organize Your Life podcast. I am passionate about organizing because it makes my clients' lives so much easier, more relaxed, and with more time to spend the way they want to. In every podcast in the show, I'll lay out a simple organizing concept, and I'll tell you why it's important. I'll also include an action step at the end so you can start practicing right away. My specialty is chunking down this big topic so it's not overwhelming. That's the concept for this podcast, which is based on my first book, 52 Simple Ways to Get Organized. The book is available on my website and on Amazon. I work with clients in person in the Berkeley, California area and via email and Skype, so you don't have to be local to me. Visit the Hire tab on my website or email me at claire@cluttercoach.net. If you like the show, please rate it and review it. To do that, go to my website, cluttercoach.net, and scroll down for the show notes. Each show notes post has a link to leave a review in iTunes. I would so appreciate that. Okay, on to the podcast. This is podcast number 59. Today I'm going to respond to an email I got from a listener. Her question had several parts to it, and I'm going to address just one part of it today because it's kind of complicated. But the part I'm going to talk about today is about living with other people. In her case, it's adult children who have come back to live in the family home. But I'm going to talk about living with roommates in general, and even with your spouse and kids. If you do have young kids, of course, you get to be the parent and set all the rules. You get to do all the work, too, unfortunately, until your kids are old enough to help. Back in podcast 20, I talked about the value of teaching your kids organizing skills as soon as possible. In my view, this does not take away from their childhood need to play, nor should it be presented as, we're all in this together and you need to do your part. What it does do is teach children important skills that they will need to become responsible adults, not to mention good roommates. And that is a gift. Since I'm not a parenting expert, I'm going to use the analogy of business. The business you run is your home. It can be run with you as the CEO or more like a collective or some other business model. That's your choice. But the general business principles are the same. What kind of business? Well, what you're creating is a healthy, happy household. That's your product. Everyone who lives in the home is working toward that goal. That's their job. So that's the big picture. What does it take to make this business successful? Now, this is where you talk about the basic values and make sure that you share enough of the same ones. Cleanliness, organization, supply stock, decor, activities, meals, much more. There is a lot to discuss in this category. In a traditional family situation, much of this information is imparted by example. A lot is taken for granted. That changes when you live with roommates who may have different values. And that's why it's so beneficial to be exposed to people in general who aren't like you. It reveals to you your values and standards that you hold that you aren't aware of until they come in contrast with someone else's. This leads to much more effective communication. Discovering your own assumptions is a pet topic of mine. Back in podcast 18, I talked about how your home office doesn't have to be an office, for example. It can be somewhere else in the house. It maybe doesn't look like a traditional office at all. People can get stuck not being happy with the way things are, but not being able to see outside that box and realize that they can do things quite differently. I try to show them how. Back to shared values. We're basically talking about your corporate culture in the home. Do you share meals? Does everyone keep food separate? Or you do a combination of the two? There's no right answer to this. There's simply good communication, agreement, and probably some compromise. Is it better to have a sign-up sheet for chores, or to figure that everyone knows what a clean and organized house looks like and entails and participate accordingly? A good analogy here is the typical company meeting. Projects are discussed, next steps and next goals are discussed, but often who will do what and when they will do it is not discussed. Have you ever gotten back to your desk after a meeting and realized that you have no idea what you're supposed to do? It's not a good thing. You can't be productive if you don't know your priorities or even what should be on your to-do list. In your home, that means identifying the chores that need to be done and figuring out, in whatever way you choose, who will do them and when. The thing I like best about this business analogy is that it can help you look at the situation more objectively. It can provide a structure to contain all the sensitive topics that need to be discussed. It can give you guidelines for those discussions to keep them productive. You're all after the same goal, a happy, healthy household. Here's a special note to moms. Make sure you aren't doing too much, whether your kids are children or adults. But especially with those moms with adult children living at home. You are not doing everyone's laundry. Of course, you'll never stop being a mom, but your relationship with adult children needs to change and become more, adult, more independent. I mentioned earlier that you can be the CEO or you can run the house more like a collective. That is your choice. What can you do right now? The same thing I suggest people starting with my email e-course. Develop your vision. First, your vision. Be clear on what your version of this happy, healthy household is before sharing it with others. Hey, thanks for listening. I'm Claire Tompkins, the Clutter Coach. If you like the show, I'd love it if you'd leave a rating and review in iTunes. You can subscribe, too, so the podcast will be ready and waiting for you to listen to. You'll find the show notes on my blog at www.cluttercoach.net, and you can check out my store to find books I've written and a whole bunch of other stuff. If you're a fan of the show, you can become a patron on patreon.com for as little as $1 a month. You can find my page by going to the Patreon website, that's Patreon, and searching on Clutter Coach. I'll still post the podcast free of charge, but I've got some cool rewards for folks who want to help me make the show even better. Come back next week for a new podcast.